One thing I just want to appreciate the folks here and the folks in the room, everybody in the room, because I think one big piece of the fairness story, and I love the coming in piece, because everybody in this room has somewhere they came into fairness. And one of the most exciting things about fairness is that it's been a journey in this community. People had a personal journey to decide either something about their sexuality, or as Jane said, coming out as a parent, or as other folks coming out as a supporter, politicians coming out as a justice person, that there's been all this journey in it. And on the part about the opposition, I just have to say this. One was that there's also been a journey in the LGBT community. Racism wasn't just something we had to deal with as something out there in the community. We as white people have had to struggle with our racism as lesbian, gay, and bisexual people. And one of the ongoing stereotypes, especially among gay and lesbian white people, was that the biggest problem was the black community. I remember people would say that over and over again. Oh, well, that's where they'd see one minister and think, oh, it's the whole black community, right? One black person speaks for all the black people. There was a poll, and it's one of my favorite polls in the entire campaign. And I always loved saying to folks, so where do you think the support is for fairness? And people would inevitably say, oh, it's the Highlands. It's the Highlands. Oh, well, then it's Crescent Hill. It would be like this, game to get it right. I said, actually, the largest support for passage of the fairness law is in the West End. It was in the black community. And that one of our biggest, I'm going to name three for the record, of our biggest opponents. One was a very powerful, very, very rich, very, very well-connected church in this community called Southeast Christian. And Southeast Christian had a very close relationship with another powerhouse. It used to be called, in the early days of fairness, the Chamber of Commerce. It is now Greater Louisville, Inc. Greater Louisville, Inc.'s membership was predominantly Southeast Christian. The opposition was not based on religious terms. It was the fact that passage of fairness would give people who were employed in workplaces one more piece of protection against discrimination. Yeah. Does that mean folks in business say, oh yeah, I want to discriminate? No, it's about the bottom line. It's about making money. Right before fairness passed, GLI and Southeast Christian had an idea that they were going to scare Steve Maugre into upsetting the whole thing. Remember, we had finally won Steve Maugre over, and he was president of the board. He was very important. And they reached out to the biggest black church in Louisville, Reverend Kevin Cosby. And I called Braden. I said, Ann, we have found out that the three of them are going to descend on Steve Maugre and tell him they're going to throw him out of office. And if Steve backs off, we're not going to win this. And this was 2 days before the vote. She said, call Reverend Cosby. I thought, oh no, who am I to call Reverend Cosby? I called Reverend Cosby. He said, yeah, I got invited to their meeting. He said, I have no interest in going. That's discrimination, pure and simple. Then we went to the head of the Bank of Louisville at the time, who was key leader in the Chamber of Commerce, and said, is it going to look very good for the Chamber of Commerce to be taking sides? Of course we wanted them on our side, but they weren't going to do that. Taking sides in this battle? And they were like, huh. And the Courier-Journal found out that they were going to and really criticized them for that. So that meeting didn't happen. If it had, that would have been two extremely powerful, extremely rich, extremely white institutions in this society that would have ripped this whole thing up. And the other, I have to say, and I won't go into it, is that we had a very challenging situation in the mayor's office. We had a mayor who did not want this passing because it was controversial for him. And he was not helping, and there were periods when he was working against it. And I'm just saying that for the record because history gets retold. It's like everybody marched with Martin Luther King. All the white people who marched with Martin Luther King. I don't know where they were hiding, but it has become the same with fairness. And although we welcome that, we want everybody, we want the bandwagon to be big. I think we also have to be serious about everyone's not there from the beginning, and everyone's on a journey. And we welcome people in that journey. Thank you.
Thank you.
But there's something that hasn't really been brought up yet, and this happened about 5 years before fairness was actually founded, and this was in 1986 when GLHRC convinced the Human Relations Commission or board to hold some hearings about whether they were going to approve the concept of a gay rights ordinance. And it was held over at the Howard Johnson's over on Jefferson Street. And I think one of the real early heroes, and his name has not come up yet, but it's Lyman Johnson. Lyman Johnson, of course, was a real early civil rights hero back in the 1950s when they were trying to integrate the University of Louisville. In 1986, he was on the Human Relations Board for Jefferson County. And I can remember he was sitting all the way over on the right while all these people, pro and con, on gay rights were getting up to the microphone and saying their 2 cents. And at the very end, the board was deliberating and they were talking about it. And finally, Lyman Johnson sits there and he says, well, you know, I've heard people say that homosexuality is a choice and it should not therefore be protected. Other people are saying that homosexuality is inborn, it's natural. And he says, well, our current civil rights laws protect people on the basis of choice of religion, and it also protects people on the basis of race, which is not a choice. So whether homosexuality is a choice or whether it's inborn doesn't make any difference. And the whole room just burst in applause. It was just an electrifying moment. And I think that was our very first idea that we were on the right track. So I thank Lyman Johnson for everything.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that memory. GLHRC, which was founded, as Pam described, by really a handful of people who put a lot of time into building support for that extension of laws, a hate crime ordinance, an inclusive hate crime ordinance. And for those of you, and I know there's a few historians in the crowd, here's a primary document. This is the report that they wrote and circulated to build that support, and Justice for All. This is September 1985. But when they got together and started this group, they thought about GLHRC, Gay and Lesbian Human Rights Coalition. That's what they wanted to call it. But they felt that at the time it was too risky. It was too identifiably gay. Instead, they had what David Lott and Pam and other people have said to me was a code. It's a code name. Instead, they called it, what's here on the report, Greater Louisville Human Rights Coalition, because they didn't want those words gay and lesbian in there. But look at where we are today. So I just want to tell that story. Thank you.
I think I was on the margins or peripheral. And while I was a suburban housewife raising 3 kids, I did go once to my East End church where Jane was part of a panel. And I remember that was out at the Church of the Epiphany. And I remember behind me were people saying, they can change, you know, they can change. I mean, it was a group of whatever. But the question that I have, you did touch on it, was about going door to door. What was the the main components of the campaign to bring the general public in?
Well, one of the things we did, we had an educational program, and we did a lot of speaking to organizations, to classes. We trained people. We trained a speakers bureau, and it was lesbian, gay, trans, straight people, and we just got invited as well as sought out opportunities. We had a very visible campaign in terms of actions, direct actions that people could be involved in. We had letter writing campaigns. We had press opportunities that we got press coverage, but we also created opportunities to be very visible. So
I remember postcards.
a lot of really, yeah, we got.
That was the late 80s, or when was that exactly?
91. The day they announced the platform, they delivered 1,000 postcards on the steps of City Hall.
That's the
Thousands of postcards.
Yeah, and also there was a door-to-door campaign in the Southeast Christians target area.
Oh, yeah.
To those people in the Southeast, like out there out in South Louisville, like they had a door-to-door campaign knocking on those people's doors.
And in some of those districts, we had talked to people. We knew more about people in that district than the elected officials did, because we were actually talking door to door in ways that some of those elected officials weren't.
And then you had those people to contact their elected officials.
Yeah.